Georgia, thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. It's a quiet stretch of weather to close out the work week, but I think a forecast that you will be very happy with, as especially we go into these afternoons where we will have some near average high temperatures and even slightly above average high temperatures. But then as we go into the end of the weekend, that's where some rain chances are going to creep back into the forecast. But first things first, we have to go ahead and talk about some rain that was in the forecast as of yesterday. Take a look all over central Georgia, where don't pay attention to some of these points. I didn't select these. These were already on the preset. But we can see that most everyone did receive something in the way of at least a very light shower. But there are a few gaps, like the areas of northern Jasper County, maybe this little dash right over here to the east of Eatonton, over here in parts of Washington County. For the most part, you did see totals somewhere around 1/10 of an inch or about 2/10 of an inch, but some isolated pockets maybe got closer to around a ½ inch of rain down here in southern Jasper County, down here in southern Bibb County, actually right here on the county line, or the triad of Twiggs County, Bibb County, and getting down into Houston County. About a ½ inch of rain in portions of Crawford County, one over here on the triad of Lamar County, Upson County, and getting into Monroe County. But our highest totals that we could find were actually over here in portions of west and southwest central Georgia. Most areas of Warner Robins, somewhere with a couple tenths of an inch of rain, just around the Fort Valley area, just shy of an inch of rain, and some isolated pockets over in Macon County, 1 and 1.3 inches of rain in those pockets. And then across our southern tier of counties, we didn't really see anything substantial in the way of rain. It's actually as you go farther to the south and the southeast, the areas of Wheeler County, Montgomery County, and over here in Johnson and Emmanuel counties, where we did total about an inch in some very lucky spots. But at Middle Georgia Regional Airport specifically, we're finally on the board for the month of February, but we didn't even get totals of a tenth of an inch. 8/100ths of an inch of rain. And once again, I don't think this data is entirely accurate because as of last Wednesday, we did receive some rainfall at Middle Georgia Regional Airport, but we were having some issues with our recording. So I would imagine that we're more than likely still in the dry category for the month of February, which is not necessarily where we want to be, but I don't think we're down into the very dry category. I think we got about at least a ½ inch of rain as of last week's weather maker that we're not recording any data from. But it is Thursday, so we did get a new update to our drought monitor. Didn't see any improvement. In fact, we saw some steady worsening where now a pocket of an extreme drought that was over to the west of us now stretches over into portions of Taylor County, Crawford County, Upson County, and over here into areas like Lamar County and Monroe County. But the good news is some of these locations did actually see some totals maybe closer to an inch, but I don't anticipate that would get them out of the extreme drought criteria. And more likely than not, you are enveloped in this orange shade, which is going to indicate a severe drought. Have a couple areas that are still in a moderate drought, but we also see another patch of a severe drought in orange stretching down from the north down into our northern tier of counties, Jasper, Putnam, and Hancock counties. Looks like areas like Milledgeville, Gray, maybe over to Sandersville, the northern half of Wilkinson County, Sparta, maybe getting into Forsyth and Juliet up there in Monroe County. You guys are about the only few areas that are still under a moderate drought, which just means that you don't need rain as bad as most areas of central Georgia do in the orange, or especially over to the west. So we definitely could use our fair share of some rain. And once again, just to recap, this is nothing new. We have been in drought or abnormally dry conditions since September 16th up here in the Bibb County area. However, I do imagine most of central Georgia could probably say the very same thing. I don't think anyone's gotten out of these dry conditions since we really started them after we got through that very wet month of August as of last year. So overall, it's going to be a great finish to the work week. Valentine's Day is continuing to look dry according to our long-range models and now our high-resolution models, which FutureView does have all of Saturday within range. But widespread rain will come in as we go into Sunday. But remember what I just talked about when we're talking about these rain chances. I do believe that this rain is going to be pretty beneficial in terms of getting us out of these drought and these dry conditions that we've had for months and months on end. So here's a walk around the quad. There is nothing but blue sky out there all across central Georgia. It is very, very nice to finally see an image like this all around the quad as opposed to gloomy and dreary and gray outside like we did see over the last couple of days. Actually, looking over here to the west right now, maybe something indicating of a bit of a fire over here. It looks like there's a bit of a dark cloud, maybe indicating some smoke out there as you make your way over to Peach County on Highway 96. Nonetheless, it is a story of completely sunny skies and also down here at the Georgia National Fairgrounds. Take a look at that. no winds whatsoever. So the breeze has finally began to subside just a little bit. So obviously we've had our fair share of some winds in the forecast as of recently. I don't think we're really going to notice the winds in the forecast until we get sometime into the later hours on Saturday and go into Sunday when our next low pressure system is forecasted to arrive. So 55 degrees here in Macon. You can see this matches the number in Montgomery and Charleston. But across the eastern half of the United States, you can continue to see a warmer air mass present down in the deep south over into Texas, seeing some scattered 50s even as far north as Oklahoma, getting up into northern Texas, even a 50 up in Wichita, which is typically an area that's pretty chilly this time of year. 73 in Laredo, I think that takes the cake for the warmest number that we do see. But down here in the southeast, almost everyone is dealing with the same story, but we are seeing a slightly cooler air mass filter in, but we're also seeing high pressure have an influence on our setup. So what it's trying to do is create that clockwise rotation and maybe even funnel in some of that colder air up into North Carolina, maybe down through South Carolina and eventually into central Georgia, courtesy of the wedge. I don't anticipate these winds to stay around for long enough in order to influence our forecast in that way, but we'll continue to keep an eye out on it. 55 in Macon, pretty similar to the 54 in Athens, 54 in Augusta, 57 in Columbus. Starting to see some 60s in our southernmost areas here in Georgia, and then a 65 in Tallahassee, 65 also in Jacksonville, and even a couple 40s back up here into northern Mississippi and northern Alabama, up in Starkville and up in Huntsville. So here in central Georgia, the game of the game is 50s, and this is a pretty good warm-up from what we've seen this morning. We actually got down into the mid-30s and the low 30s, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment, but this is just meant to show you a current glimpse of what the temperatures are sitting at here at the 11 a.m. hour. Pretty good warm-up from the mid and the upper 30s that we started out at. Some areas may have seen a warm-up of 20 degrees already since this morning, but 59 at the warmest in Vidalia and down into Rochelle, and it does look like more so the story of some lower and some mid-50s as you go farther to the north in central Georgia. So a little bit of a temperature difference, but that does make sense because our front moved in from north to south yesterday, so areas to the north are still feeling that colder air mass a little bit more than areas farther down to the south. So here's a look at the breezy conditions. Mainly southeastern central Georgia, still dealing with that widespread blue shade, and that's also going to create some sustained winds around 7 to 8 to 9 miles per hour. It is relatively calm in terms of winds that we do see up to the north and the northwest and down here in Warner Robins. And we did just get a glimpse at the Georgia National Fairgrounds. That did show us that there's virtually nothing in the way of winds as of right now. And even that blue shade that we do see, that's expected to subside as we go throughout the rest of your afternoon. So satellite and radar actually had a few clouds up to the north earlier this morning, but it doesn't look like that's the case anymore. We do see some clouds up here in the upstate South Carolina, western North Carolina, northeastern Georgia, but overall it is a very quiet story down here in the southeast United States. No rain chances, no cloud cover, and no signs of any changes to your forecast on their way over the course of the next few days. So let's talk about some numbers. 48 for a morning low yesterday. I'm a little skeptical on that. I want to know when we hit that 48-degree mark. It would have definitely had to have been, I imagine, closer to the midnight hour before or right after we crossed over into yesterday, because most of the time your temperatures yesterday morning, they were in the upper 50s and they were in the low 60s. So 48 degrees, that was probably where we were. We actually warmed up as we went throughout the overnight hours as opposed to cooling down like we typically do. But 74 for a high temperature. Remember what I was talking about? We will have some peaks of sunshine yesterday afternoon, and that's exactly what we did have, but we still had a few spotty and isolated shower chances, some of which were of the steadier and the heavier nature. Definitely saw our fair share of some steady showers popping up in Warner Robins yesterday afternoon, closer to around the 2 to 3 o'clock window, and also some later into the evening last night as well. But 74 for a high temperature, and those breaks in cloud cover and the breaks from rain we saw yesterday afternoon, 11 degrees above average, 10 degrees above your average low of 38 degrees, and 74, 7 degrees off this record set back 6 years ago in 2020, 81 degrees for that record high temperature yesterday, and 9 degrees for the record low set back in 1973. That year ring a bell for many of you? Blizzard of 73, our temperatures were blistering cold. So in terms of precipitation, like we mentioned, only 8/100ths of an inch. This is where your departure of rain stands as of now, which it actually has gone down even farther than what we saw yesterday. Rain of this amount obviously isn't going to put a good dent in this year departure. So minus 3.5 inches. We are 3.5 inches below where we should be in terms of our rainfall totals for 2026 so far, but we do have a more substantial rainmaker on its way as we go throughout the course of your weekend. Sunrise 7:21, sunset at 6:17 p.m. yesterday evening. And yesterday, with a high temperature of 74, it marked the second day in a row that we have seen a high temperature in the 70s and the third day in a row with an above average high temperature, which now puts your tally for the month of February at 5 degrees, matching the number of below average days we've seen. And just for good measure, we have one day that was exactly on par with average this past Sunday with a high temperature of 62. So February has kind of been a tale of two forecasts, but we have been equally as warm as we have been equally as cold to kickstart the second month of the year. So this morning, it was a chilly morning, especially when you compare it to the numbers that we did see as of yesterday. Remember, I was talking about the numbers you walked out the door to were in the upper 50s and the low 60s. Numbers this morning got down into the mid 30s and the upper 30s, which doesn't seem like that low because as of recent weeks, we've been telling you about temperatures getting down into the teens, into the low 20s, feels like numbers that got as low as the single digits. So obviously these numbers didn't look as cold as some of those numbers that we have seen recently, but compared to what we have been feeling recently, as soon as yesterday morning, these numbers were a good deal colder. So I imagine that's why maybe 35 this morning probably felt like it was a little bit colder than it normally is because we haven't been used to seeing that too much as of recently. But that chilly morning will be transitioning into a fantastic day. Nothing but sunshine like we saw as we took a walk around the quad on the sky cams. 66 degrees for a high temperature. This isn't the 70s from yesterday and the day before, I know that, but this is probably about the next best option if you are searching for some warmer weather. We'll be a couple degrees above average, and your average high has actually gotten an uptick from yesterday, now up to 63 degrees for your average high temperature, and the winds will continue to be pretty calm throughout the rest of today. Nothing but sunshine, not even really anything in the way of a breeze. 66 degrees, not quite as good feeling as maybe the low 70s feel, but it's still going to be a great afternoon for any plans that you do have. So here's a look at your hour-by-hour warm-up. A lot closer to this graphic than we have been over the last couple of days, which makes me think maybe I did undershoot today's high temperature. Wouldn't be surprised if I did, but right now we are still a good deal off of some of these numbers. We saw 55 in Macon. I do believe we'll warm up about 5 more degrees by the time we roll into lunchtime, and we'll continue to warm up into this 3 to 4, maybe even into 5 o'clock window. So now that we're getting into kind of the hours of daylight shifting as we get the days to get longer and longer and we head into the spring season, I do imagine this window of our warmest temperatures, it's going to start to move a little bit. I would say it could start maybe around the 2 p.m. hour, but it typically is going to begin maybe closer to around 3, 4, and 5 o'clock as that sunset gets later and later. But right now you can still see indications between 4 and 5 of maybe the temperatures beginning to cool down as we will be approaching sunset fairly shortly after 5 p.m. going into around 6:15 in the evening. But as we get, say, maybe the sunset back to around 7 p.m., that's going to lead to that window of warmest temperatures getting extended a little bit later into the day. So here's a look at your surface map. High pressure has settled in across the eastern half of the United States. That's what's leading to this very broad clockwise rotation of the winds that you do see. And that high pressure is centered kind of in the corner right now of Illinois, Indiana, and getting up into Kentucky. But that is filtered in behind this frontal boundary that passed through yesterday. You can see that it's still moving and making its way through the peninsula of Florida. But overall, our cooler and drier air mass has started to settle in, which high pressure is definitely indicating in the form of that drier air mass. And then we do see a stationary boundary still draping all the way across southern areas of portions of Louisiana, getting over into Texas, and actually over by the Four Corners region of the country is where a lot of meteorologists out to the west have their eyes on right now, because that is looking to be the next low pressure system that does form, and that's going to trek across the southern United States over the course of the next couple of days. But right now that is a couple days away, so it's not really of concern in your forecast. And once we see more definitive features, I'll pop it up on the surface map to show you it forming in real time and some of the rain that is associated with it in areas back over to our west. So let's zoom through future view. There's not going to be many talking points. I threw some pause points on when we start to see some clouds. So yeah, you know it's a quiet forecast. It's 5 p.m. later this afternoon, going to be crystal clear. An amazing sunset will be in order for any dinner plans that you may have outdoors. Then we go into the midnight hour. Overnight, we start to see a few passing clouds, and some of those may hang around to greet you out the door tomorrow morning. Nonetheless, we are still going to get plenty of peaks of sunshine, and I do anticipate maybe some of these clouds might lead to a pretty spectacular image in terms of the sunrise tomorrow. Typically, when we have a little bit of cloud cover in the forecast, some of that sunlight, when the sun is a little bit lower in the sky, that sun angle could get under the cloud deck, and it can start to reflect some beautiful colors off the bottom of some of those clouds each and every morning. But nonetheless, whatever we have in the way of cloud cover for Friday morning, it's completely gone as we go into the second half of the day. Not really much in the way of a breeze. It's just a very quiet forecast for the rest of your Friday afternoon. But then let's go into Saturday, where we start to see some changes as early as the morning hours, and that's once again coming in the form of cloud cover. But that's about all we're going to be talking about throughout your Valentine's Day morning, afternoon, and the evening hours. I would anticipate a good chunk of the afternoon on Saturday to be mostly cloudy, so it may appear a bit gloomy. However, you will still see plenty of peaks of sunshine on occasion throughout the day, and then we'll go into the afternoon a little bit farther, 3 p.m., maybe spotting a couple showers up to the north of us, but still not seeing anything in the way of rain chances. Looking good to go. How about 6 p.m.? You have a primetime dinner reservation right there in the early evening hours. Still looking pretty magnificent. In fact, even better than it is a little bit earlier in the afternoon as we start to see some gaps in the cloud cover, and hopefully you'll get a beautiful image of the sunset for your Valentine's Day evening. Now let's go all the way to 9 to 10 p.m. and that's when we start to see maybe a couple of light green spots popping up. This is going to be good enough for a 10% chance of rain. You might see a sprinkle, you might see a light shower throughout the late night hours on Saturday, but if you have plans to go ahead and call it an early night before this, then this is not going to impact you. And again, this is just a select few spots. Don't go canceling any outdoor plans that you do have for Valentine's Day over a 10% chance of rain. 10% chance of rain, once again, means a 90% chance that you don't see anything in the way of rain. And honestly, it's probably an even greater chance than that if we really want to get down to specific numbers of percentages. But as we go overnight into early on Sunday morning, that's when the forecast begins to flip. So here you go, 4 a.m. on Sunday, a bit more widespread showers, some pockets of some steadier and some heavier rain are going to start to pop up into central Georgia, and we still have a whole lot more to the north of us, over to the west of us. And again, if you're seeing posts from Atlanta meteorologists, I know a lot of those pop up on my timeline. They probably pop up on your timeline as well. They're forecasting showers for Valentine's Day. That's not the case down here. Their rain chances are going to pop up in northern Georgia a bit earlier than, say, our rain chances are going to pop up down here in central Georgia. But it does look like we get a pretty early start to at least some scattered showers on early Sunday morning, probably before many of you are awake. And then as we go throughout the rest of the morning and into the afternoon, I am anticipating more widespread coverage of that rain and some pockets of some moderate and some heavy showers, maybe even a couple of storms. But we'll talk more about that in just a moment. That's where Future View cuts off right now. Again, Ben Jones will have a much better view of that as we go into this evening once Future View goes a little bit farther out into the future. And something else I do want to note, I don't know if it's quite happened just yet. We typically get a couple updates with our Future View models each and every day. In fact, I'm going to try to flash it back to this graphic. So you will see we always label these models over here in the top right of the banner. So this is the graph model, the one we typically use on a daily basis. Well, the graph model normally updates about 4 times each day. So we look out for those different updates, and typically we get one right before the stream starts, sometime closer to around 10 to 10:30 in the morning. Well, the graph is now going to start updating every other hour. So we're going to get 12 updates to this model throughout each and every day. I, once again, don't know if it's quite happened just as of yet, but that's going to mean that we're going to see a lot more variation in between model runs, and you're probably going to hear us refer to some of those model runs. We'll say last model run before, and stuff like that. But this is going to give me more of a sample size each and every morning when I do come here on the extended forecast. I can have a couple model runs of a sample size to really fine tune the forecast as opposed to just maybe one so far throughout the day. I'll have a couple more updates in real time, and the more and more updates that we see, that's obviously going to allow for me to communicate the forecast a little bit better to you. but it flashed all the way back to the beginning of this, but we'll kind of zoom through the next couple of days, passing cloud cover overnight tonight into tomorrow morning. Then we welcome back clouds in the morning hours on Saturday. Looks like a mostly cloudy atmosphere for a good chunk of your afternoon, starting to clear as we go into the early evening hours. Then we welcome in some scattered rain chances. Once again, just a few light showers and some sprinkles as we go into the nighttime hours. Then rain chances get a bit more widespread as we go throughout the overnight and early morning hours. In fact, I think we might have just seen one of those model run updates there in real time right there, because it looked like that last frame that we just showed you was a little bit different than when we popped it up before. So that's what I mean. But still, the idea remains the same. We'll see a little bit of fluctuation with some timing, but overall, it does maintain the general idea that we are going to start to see rain pop up really early in the morning on Sunday, almost overnight Saturday into early Sunday. But that's going to be a time of the day when hopefully all of your plans are already concluded. It's Sunday that has been looking like the day we are most confident in rain chances so far, and we continue to reiterate the confidence that most of your Saturday, most of your Valentine's Day, it's looking like a dry forecast. We'll have more clouds in the picture than we'll have throughout the rest of today and throughout your Friday, but then we will have that 10% chance of rain just for the nighttime hours, maybe a sprinkle or two that a select few spots may encounter, but it's not going to be anything substantial in the way of rain, and I doubt you're really going to even notice it whatsoever. So here's a look at the next 3 days temperature-wise. It is basically carbon copy each and every day, today all the way through Saturday. I did mention those differences already with Saturday in the way of cloud cover and a few rain chances, but temperature-wise, it's basically the same story. Mid to upper 30s to start out each and every day, and then we have some mid and upper 60s for high temperatures each and every day for your short-term forecast. Do we see any changes past that 3-day window? Well, it does look like maybe some signs of a slight temperature increase as we roll into Sunday and into Monday. Even despite the widespread rain on Sunday, we're still forecasting a pretty warm afternoon, which does give me the idea that we are going to see a pretty substantial increase in the moisture content, maybe even get some dew point temperatures back somewhere in the 60s, and that could be kind of beneficial for some heavier rainfall rates. We'll talk more about that once again. I know I keep saying that a lot, but we have to wait until we get to the long-range models. But your high temperatures still going to be above average, and your morning low temperatures are still going to be right there around average. However, they are going to get a pretty substantial bump up when we get that increase in moisture and cloud cover starting already early on Sunday and going into your Monday morning, where we'll start out President's Day morning with a morning low temperature near 50 degrees. So rain chances getting a bit of an earlier start than these long-range models are saying, but as of the latest model run, they continue to try to come into a little bit better agreement. But still, just like the last couple of days, the European model is running ahead of the GFS in green. So it does look like by 7 a.m. on Sunday, it's still kind of patchy showers all across central Georgia and northern Georgia. I would maintain that belief, but I do believe that the rain chances will be pretty widespread over all of central Georgia by the time we roll into lunchtime. Like the European model says, I don't think they're going to be back over to the west like the GFS does continue to say. So once again, it is looking like all day Sunday, just really, really messy. Almost everyone, in fact, I think I can go ahead and say with pretty good confidence that everyone in central Georgia will receive at least something in the way of rain throughout your Sunday. And it's mainly looking like more of a morning and afternoon rain chance. But I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some of these rain chances stick around into the evening hours. And then as we go into the nighttime frame, that's when the rain chances begin to taper off. But obviously you can see some of these flashes of yellow, some flashes of red. That would indicate something maybe in the potential of some stronger weather or good agreement amongst both of these models. Once again, our severe weather chances are still remaining very low. We'll talk about why that is. It does look like we do have the chance for maybe some thunderstorms, but thunderstorms don't correlate to necessarily severe weather. Thunderstorms just mean that, okay, you might have a little bit of instability in the atmosphere, and we can see our fair share of low-end thunderstorms. The winds get a little bit gusty, gets a little bit loud outside, but it's not anything in the way of something that causes damage in the form of severe weather. So I just want to go ahead and hammer that point in. As we're now getting into our severe weather season, you're going to hear us start to say thunderstorms more frequently. We will tell you if that thunderstorm chance is going to be associated with anything in the way of severe weather. And as of right now, it is still not looking like that's going to be the case for your Sunday. But things can and will change, so of course we'll keep you updated if that does change. But let's go over the timing a little bit more, where once again, Monday morning, maybe holding on to about a 10% chance of a sprinkle. The GFS is the main model run that has been hinting at this, the European not necessarily on board. So I threw a 10% to really cover the bases for any lingering moisture that we see into the beginning of the work week next week for your President's Day. Then we go into Tuesday, Wednesday, and all the way into next Thursday, where we see some passing clouds here and there, but overall it is looking like a dry forecast that is going to be in the cards over that time frame. So in terms of how much rainfall we are going to receive, the models have backed off their totals a good bit. This GFS model yesterday, remember, it had some pockets of 2 and 3 inches of rain. And they're still there. They're just not over central Georgia. They're down to the south and the southeast of us. Take a look at Savannah over there in the corner, about 2 inches of rain flat over the course of this week and even into the beginning of the work week next week. So it does look like our range, maybe a ½ inch of rain all the way up to around an inch. I would say more widespread totals closer to about an inch is going to be in store. Let's take a look at what the European does have to say. And this does actually have some totals up to about around 1 inch. Dublin, Cordele, 1.2 inches down in Eastman. And again, when we show you these future view rainfall graphics, especially the long range models, which don't have near as good of resolution as our short range models do, like the graph, this is just a general range. This is kind of just trying to give you a good estimate well ahead of time about a range of rainfall that you will see. It is very, very hard to predict specific amounts of rain. We might be able to get you within about an inch or two of a range of what rainfall totals we will see. This doesn't mean that Macon's going to see exactly 0.6 inches of rain. Could that happen? Yes, absolutely. But it is very unlikely that that is going to be the exact rainfall total that we see in the Macon area. And of course, it's all relative to where exactly you are living. So I do believe, for the most part, the rainfall total is going to be about an inch to maybe about an inch and a half across most areas that you will see across the entire state of Georgia. But there will be some isolated pockets that get closer to, say, around 2 inches of rain, which is indicated kind of by a little bit of a darker shade, and that's present in some patches, but it's not necessarily going over any of those locations that we do have grabbed on this graphic. So that's what I would expect. Maybe some lucky areas luck out with a little bit more rain than others. Otherwise, we do continue to maintain confidence that everyone's going to receive at least a pretty substantial amount of rain, something that will be beneficial for our forecast. That continues to be reiterated by now the day 4 excessive rainfall outlook, which basically remains the same as what we were talking about yesterday. Just all of central Georgia under a risk of some marginal flash flooding, which just means some more nuisance flooding. Some areas that don't drain well, they're going to start to pond up. Those ditches and over to the side of roads, those are going to be very easy to pond up if we do get some pretty heavy rainfall rates, and you'll notice your fair share of some puddles on the ground as well. So for this weekend low pressure system, what should you expect? Rain is looking to hold off until Sunday, so I think as early as really past midnight going into Sunday, we'll start to get some more widespread rain in the forecast, but still starting out of the scattered nature more so. The timing is still a little bit up in the air for how long this rain is going to last throughout the day on Sunday, but it is looking like it will be most of the day. So any plans on Sunday? Once again, you're going to want to go ahead and make a backup plan for those. Make sure that you stay inside. I think in terms of your Valentine's Day weekend, go ahead and make those plans to do something special with your special someone on Friday and Saturday. And then Sunday, both of you can kind of just enjoy an all-day movie marathon. It's going to be perfect dreary weather for that to happen. This rain is going to be mostly in the form of moderate and heavy showers. It's going to get going, more so some light and steady rain, but I think we are going to receive our fair share of some yellows and some oranges, but also we are going to see some flashes of some red on the radar imagery and future view as we go into the next couple of hours, really over the course of the next day. So a few storms are possible, and what I mean by that is going to be maybe a few rumbles of thunder, but that doesn't necessarily correlate to severe weather chances. Just because you do hear some rumbles of thunder outside, those severe weather chances remain very low. The National Weather Service has highlighted the potential of maybe a stray severe storm or two that could get issued over the course of Sunday. But right now, that's typically equivalent to a level 1 risk. So don't be surprised if we do see a low-end level 1 risk for maybe a stray severe warning or two that could be outlined by the time we get closer to the weekend. That's all it would mean. Just maybe 1 or 2 areas might have a thunderstorm that packs a little bit more of a punch than, say, what we would be talking about with a typical thunderstorm. So I would expect some heavier rainfall rates, and that's exactly what we do need. I talk about it all the time. Sometimes your severe weather does correlate to heavier rainfall rates, and that's exactly what we do need. Totals from 1 to 1.5 inches, isolated totals closer to 2 inches. That's what we were just talking about right there. And then after that, we'll hold on to a very minuscule rain chance for your President's Day on Monday. Many federal employees and kids will be off of school, so you won't really have to worry about that rain chance. But 90% chance of some showers and even a couple of low-end storms throughout the day on Sunday. It's kind of the one blemish that we do have across your 7-day forecast. Then we see a warming trend back into the 70s, and we might even see some upper 70s as we go into the end of next week. So we'll be back with another look at what's ahead this weekend tomorrow at 11 a.m. So be sure to stay tuned until then.